In today's episode, I'm bringing you a founder that turned that model upside down. Dan Novias is the CEO and co-founder of Mode Mobile. It's a company that's reached over $100 million in revenue without venture capital. That's right, no VC money. Welcome, entrepreneur movers and shakers. This is the TonyDUrsoShow. You're at the right place. I thank you so much for joining in with us. Good to see you again. Now, if you've ever hit a wall trying to raise capital for your business, or you're sick of hearing, hey, you need a VC to scale, if you're sick of hearing that, then stop everything. Stick with me right now. In today's episode, I'm bringing you a founder that turned that model upside down. Dan Novias is the CEO and co-founder of Mode Mobile. It's a company that's reached over $100 million in revenue without venture capital. That's right, no VC money, just massive results fueled by everyday investors and an incredibly sharp go-to-market strategy. I hope this really gets some things going, maybe gets some light bulbs, maybe gives you some ideas of what you can do. We have something very important, so stick around, check that out. Now, Dan has built Mode, that's MODE, into a platform that pays users for their mobile engagement. How brilliant is that? And it's now one of the top apps in the Google Play Store. But what makes this interview really essential for you is the way that Dan approaches overlooked niches, wealth creation at scale, and building unstoppable ecosystems from what most people ignore. We're going to go deep on how he used community and creativity, not big checks from Sand Hill Road, to build a global powerhouse. So if you've got some hustle, of course you do, ambition and a smartphone, we all do that. Dan's going to give you a blueprint that's going to change everything. Let's start here. Let's go bring him on. Dan, welcome to the TonyDUrso Show.
Thank you for having me, Tony. I appreciate it.
Oh, I've been waiting for this one. We're all looking forward to learning about the mobile wealth revolution. I have so many questions. I want this. And as soon as everyone hears what we're going to go and how we what we go into, I think everyone's going to say, "Gosh, I want that." I'm telling you, after doing this for 10 years, I really want this. Thank you for coming up with this. And I'm probably getting ahead of myself because I'm excited. So let's start here. Let's kind of just take it back a half second. Let's talk about your story and your wins. So take us back, Dan. What sparked this entrepreneurial journey, and even tell us about that first big aha moment that made you believe this was even possible to obtain?
Yeah, in regards to Mode, or like the first,
In
my
regards
first.
to Mode and what
Okay.
you did, because what you did is so
Yeah,
revolutionary. It's like you broke the mold. You went way out of the box on this.
yeah. So I think, the story is, I think, one that a lot of founders and entrepreneurs would actually resonate with, because, to be honest, like Mode, it's not like the idea was just like, hey, like here's the idea. It was actually born out of a failure. At the time, so we had launched um, it was actually born out of multiple failures, actually, if I'm very honest with it, because what we initially had built, my co-founder and I, was this tool. We've been working together for over 12 years, and we had built this app builder at the time, and we had this idea. This was a very early app store, and it was like, hey, you can drag and drop and create these apps. But then what we started learning over time was that there's too many apps out there. And we were like, oh, we should create a platform that aggregates a bunch of different services into one place. And that was our genius idea, after like 8 years in the App Store game. It wasn't a genius idea. It was actually very difficult to get users to use that. And people would prefer these like experiences that they had in each individual app. But we had one cohort of user that was using it. And it was really interesting to see. And we went to go interview those people, and it was in the music space. And it was like one type of person that was using it. We were like, hey, why are you using this versus this, like, the other services? And it's because we were aggregating SoundCloud and Spotify and all these music services into one place, and it was free. And we asked them, well, why don't you just use, those services? And at the time, there was this weird thing where if you integrated through their API, there was no ads that played, and it was free. And so it was a very like small window of time where this was possible. I think it was just more of an accident. And we found out that these people had a lot of time, not a lot of money, and they were willing to do things that maybe didn't have the best user experience, but to have that free music, and they were very interested in that. So basically, the idea really came from this idea of like, well, if we have all these people with a lot of time, and not necessarily a lot of money, could we reward them for listening to music? And then that was a really big, interesting, like monumental movement in what the creation of this business was. And so all we did at that point in time was then put a landing page up that was like, hey, get paid to play media. And then we had 250,000 people sign up for that. By referring their friends. It was kind of like, if you remember when like Robinhood came out, it's like if you referred a friend, you could skip the line. We did one of those growth loops. And there was so much traction with just that one little, like, that's like the thing. I think it's actually a really important thing, from a takeaway as an entrepreneur is like, sometimes you're like 95% of the way there and then you just stop and and then it turns into a failure. But then that one little like micro adjustment, like gets you past the hump. And obviously there was a ton more work there, but that just at least really cemented the fact that, hey, there is a product market fit, at least for this concept, if you could figure out the business model. So then we focused on that. And then what we then realized is that, we had a lot more people on Android that were actually interested in that, because initially we started out as an iOS app, and we found that, hey, a lot more people on Android are actually more budget conscious. The phones are cheaper. There's a lot more of them around the world. And so we decided to focus on there. But I think the big aha moment of kind of what got us to the phone idea, this Earn OS and everything that you do, was really like, we actually learned that it was really hard to make money on paying people to listen to music. So we had to move into other things that actually happened on your day to day. So that's like playing games, shopping, charging, unlocking, basically anything you do for the phone. And once we moved into these other kind of spaces, that's when we really started seeing like the business grow, because we're like, oh, like, we're actually monetizing. We're able to bring advertisers. And then we started seeing that growth. And the more I started thinking about it, it's like, what we're really doing is we're not just paying people to play media. What we're really doing is like, we're kind of turning the phone into an earning software. And that's where this idea of what the ultimately became what we call like the Earn OS, which is like our earning operating system. And then ultimately this idea of Earn Phone, which is a phone that pays you. And like, this is all kind of happening in this time. I mean, this is like the pseudo baby crumbs of this idea started in the, call it 2016, 2017. 2019 was the first year we actually did any revenue after that kind of pivot. And all this time is happening, you got to think about like, what's happening in the supply chain. Costs of phones are going lower. The service is getting faster. People are spending more time on their phone. They're spending less time on their computer, more time on their phone. That's usually the first screen. And so all of this is happening at that same time. And mobile advertising is becoming more and more prominent. And so now, fast forward, we're like 5 years later, and the average person, there's 168 hours in a week. And it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're, Elon Musk or, the random Joe down the street. If you're sleeping 8 hours a day, there's 112 waking hours. And so of those 112 waking hours, the average person today is spending 35 to 40 hours a week on their smartphone, which is 1/3 of your life, waking life. And earlier generations is closer to 50 to 60. So we're talking about anywhere from 1/3 to 50 to 1/2 of your waking life on this device. And so I can like, so you see the like writing on the wall. And on top of that, if you look at all the companies that are out there, the trillion-dollar companies, they all are related to something that's happening on the mobile phone. And on top of that, they're happening by monetizing your data, monetizing your attention, and basically using you as a product, right? And so our whole thesis was like, hey, if you're spending this much time, could you create a new asset class? Could you create a new opportunity? Could you make the phone free or better? Because I see the phone actually as a conduit for opportunity, right? For people, it's your way to get connected in the world. Obviously, a lot of time is being spent there, but at minimum, it should be free. But I think actually it can do a lot more than just be free. And, there's, where this another thing that's kind of happening during this entire time is, inflation has only gotten more and more rampant over the last like 2 or 3 years, and those rising costs are impacting the like kind of more budget conscious consumers. And so Americans, already 56% of Americans don't have $1,000 in their savings account as of 2022 when money was cheap. That value is even lower now. You know what I mean? We're at all-time high in terms of credit card debt, things of that nature. And worldwide, you have 6.8 billion people that earn less than $12,000 a year. And so I think that the whole thesis of this business model is, we're creating a new earning or a new category of device. I see Earn Phone as a type of device, a way to kind of create opportunity for billions of people around the world, but it also aligns incentives. It's where the world is going, which is like, look, if you're going to use my data and attention, and just because people are budget conscious doesn't mean they don't have money. It just means that they need to be thoughtful about how they spend, whether they're going to spend on a game or a CPG brand or clothes, whatever it might be. And so that's the idea behind the business. The various iterations that kind of took us here to this on this journey, and it's been anything but easy, to say the least. A lot of ups and downs.
As an old-time marketer, what you did was proof of concept. I mean, to get 250,000 people with not too much effort to sign up and subscribe showed right away that you had a hit, that you have a homer, that you have something people want, people need. I mean, come on, you're on the phone already to make money. It's such a no-brainer, but it's such a unique, novel idea. But now you've taken it to a whole new level because you grew without venture capital. You've built over $100 million company without a dime, which is like so unheard of today. What led you down that path and to reject that? And how did you get just everybody else, the everyday investors to just buy into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think like my path as an entrepreneur has always been like I would say unique. I've been ever since I was a kid, I was like, do more of a bootstrapping entrepreneur. I didn't know what that word was. I didn't know really the word of entrepreneur was like when I was a teenager, but as I got into my 20s, I learned about venture capital. And when there was this thing that was kind of happening, because a lot of my ideas sometimes are very out of the box. And it was actually, I was able to get small like VCs as like in a seed round, 50K checks, like 100K checks, nothing insane, like just to get started. And we did raise a seed round from a lot of angels and some VCs that, write angel sized checks. But what I realized starting around like the Series A and Series B, that my business was what I call like a moonshot type business, big visions. And sometimes you want that. There's a certain type of investor that's interested in that. But the way that we went about it and the marketing and like the way my brain operates wasn't necessarily the same pattern recognition and pattern matching that I think VCs are used to. So typically you want like there's just this a certain pedigree that you're kind of looking for. It's like, I want this type of engineer founder that goes like YC talks about this when they look at their founders. And I think like in that Series A, Series B, it depends on what type of consumer kind of VCs you're looking at. And, ultimately the VCs have so much weight on what they want to do and what not to do. And it's this game of like, it was just this whole game. And at the time, and we had actually several term sheets throughout this period, especially during our growth period, that we considered taking. But at the time, like they could have ruined my business because the terms were like very, not very fair. And there's no knock on VC. VC is great if you can utilize it and harness it well. But the time has to be right. And you have to know what these things mean. Like if you're giving liquidation preference, if you're giving preferred terms, if you're giving board seats, that could totally change your view and vision for your business. Because the way I might want to grow my business is so out of the box that, you have to have the context. And, I don't try to be contrarian for the sake of contrarian. I just always try and look at all opportunities to see what's possible. And so anyways, for me, what I knew, like a skill set that I was great at is that I'm a good consumer marketer. Like I've always been able to scale products to millions of people, tens of billions of people, and I'll figure out a way to do it. And that's held true, since I was, a teenager. And so I thought about that and I was like, could I focus on that? And what would it take to, do this with crowdfunding, as an example. And then instead of, I could take a VC opportunistically when it makes sense, but I can also help and have my users become, stakeholders in our business. And, so at the end of the day, as a marketer, I think that there's two things that are super important here. Is one is like, can you turn your consumer into an advocate for your business? The biggest thing that really pushed us to being what we are today in crowdfunding was really actually in 2022, we actually had a blip in our business. So our business was growing tremendously from 2019 to 2022. It was amazing. We had a 32,481% revenue growth rate. And all is going well, and actually at the time I was discussing a lot of growth stage VCs, and I was actually pretty confident that we were going to have like a $75 million term sheet that we were going to like lock in and sign on. And had maybe one more month gone by, 2 months, I probably would have locked that deal in. And this is like Q1, Q2 of 2022. At the same time, what's happening in the broader market is, you had all this COVID stimulus, the markets are pumping, crypto's booming, at that time. And some of our largest clients were fintech customers or fintech like neobanks that were about to go public, and crypto companies, most specifically like FTX style companies. Voyager was my biggest client at the time. And ultimately these companies went bankrupt. They owed me millions of dollars because they were marketing with us, and it was great. My numbers were popping. But then the bottom fell. And suddenly I realized the impact that it takes when you have, 100 people on your team. You rely on revenue. And now you're not just managing burn, you're managing like the capitulation of your business, and your gross margins go away. And then you find out that the people that are supposed to pay you, the AR is like messy because they might go bankrupt, right? Or they are going bankrupt. And so that was a big lesson for me. And that almost took out our business at that period of time. But when I then, had this idea of like, well, I'm in a weird state because, we were very quick to act, and stabilize the business and ensure that we had good unit economics and kind of remove revenue concentration, all these kind of terms that we can get into if you want to get into more deeply. But the biggest thing that I had at that point in time was really a crux in the road, which was like, okay, right now I am too late stage for the early stage VCs, but I am too early for the late, I'm too late for the early stage VCs. I'm too late for the too early for the late stage VCs. You get what I'm saying? And on top of that, they were all underwater because the model for late stage VC is be the last money in, take it public, make your 2 or 3x and put in like a couple $100 million. Company comes out at a couple billion, and the market was pumping there. Everyone was doing great. But now all of their portfolio companies are underwater. Many of these funds are underwater. And so what they're going to do is, and just like the model of VCs, they're going to save their most prized possessions in their portfolio, and all the focus and attention will be going there. And that was in 2022. So I'm like, in 2023, it's going to be even worse. In 2024, it's going to be even worse. It's with more credit tightening. And you've seen what's happened, right? With the interest and all that stuff. So I thought to myself, okay, we have a good business here. What can I do out of the box, and kind of think about ways that I can reward my users, get them involved. And that's where the idea of the crowdfunding really came, which was like, hey, what if, people, instead of just getting points, they could also like, we famously use this, like we take users, we turn them into earners. And now we were taking earners and turning them into owners, right? And so you can get this ambassadorship, you can get these people that believe in what you believe. And I think that was like a big turning point for our business of taking that time and thinking about it in a way that not only can bring in capital, but also can build ambassadorship. So naively, it was like, that's what we're going to do. It took me 1 year to get my financials in order. And we were relatively sophisticated as a business to be able to do this. But just to get the audited financials in place, because it's a lot of work to do the crowdfunding. So that's one, caveat to this whole model. But what I will say is, we did it a year later, and we did a Reg CF, which allows you to raise $5 million. And within 3 months, we, sold out the entire thing. We actually raised closer to 6 million. We had to refund $1 million to people because we hit the cap. And then we were like, okay, like there's interest for this. People believe in what we believe. The business is stabilizing. There's this, great roadmap. And so we went after a Reg A plus, which is a much more complex mechanism. You could raise up to $75 million. That's what we're currently in right now. And it took us almost another year to get approved for that, or not approved, but qualified by the SEC. And then now the company, just in this current round that we're at, has raised over another 33 or $34 million just in this specific raise. And from over 40 some thousand shareholders around the world and over 350,000 people pending in our app. We actually broke a lot of the technology that the broker dealers had because we had so much demand for it. And so it was really this idea of kind of like, not only bringing in capital, but also, building ambassadorship. And then the third part of this is, if you think about back to the moonshot business idea, because no one's really seen this concept, I was like, I need to educate people of this concept of phones that pay you. Like, no one's created an earn phone. And that's like, I think the catch 22 of new business models. You need to like be a marketer. You need to be able to explain to people what you're doing. You need to show them that it's like there. And it takes like 7 times, for someone to see something for them to really grasp it. And that's really tricky with no budget. Like, how do I show you something as a marketer? And if I have like low runway, and so a way I thought about doing that, especially for us, where we wanted to get into stores, wanted to get into carriers, we wanted to start licensing our stuff. I was like, if I, use marketing to raise money, I am essentially getting paid and bringing money in while I get all that marketing benefit for free. And so that's the power of crowdfunding. And why we chose the retail capital route. And our goal is to, eventually take this company public. And so it's a great way to make your company a bit more, I would say, like mature, in the sense of like how you operate from a financial perspective, how you do investor updates, how you do like earnings calls. And it's not exactly like being a public company, but you are in the public eye and you need to think about your business, because being a public company is much more than just hitting numbers. It's like, there's the stock price, which in itself is like a company. And then there's the internal company. And I think as a CEO, you need to think about that as a whole. So, that's our journey of how we've gone there. And sometimes they came through hardship. I think hardship actually is a very difficult time. You have to run through these at times as an entrepreneur. And during it really sucks. It's honestly like, it really was difficult. That 2022 period, that 3-month lull was like horrible. But I'm so thankful for that time. And so much amazing stuff came out of that. And great things come out of that as well. So any difficult time will always create great opportunity if you're able to make it out of it and not die. And every year that your company goes without dying, your likelihood of success exponentially increases, right? And so I think that's kind of, our journey and what my findings are on the matter.
You've been through some hard times. There's no doubt about it. You came out with some brilliant marketing. You built $100 million ecosystem, as I mentioned before. Your Mode Mobile it's one of the top apps on Google. And I get that you're crowdfunded backed. I got that. That's good. And I get that people they get a phone. Let's kind of go into some of the simple basics to make sure we didn't that all the pennies have dropped, so that we understand the whole playing field. People get a phone, and by searching, surfing, even charging their phone, they're earning tokens or coins or something, some units.
Yeah.
That then translates into money. Can you kind of explain that whole ecosystem now?
Yeah. So there's basically, 3 ways that our business model operates. Like the first is, you can just download our app on your Android phone and basically take your smartphone, turn it into an earn phone. You could buy one of our phones and essentially you'll earn a little bit faster. And it's kind of designed for that ecosystem. So it's like, fast earning. And then like what we're now working on is really the idea of starting to license our software to other phone makers. So very similar to what Roku's done, where they power the smart TV of like, TCL, for example, or LG. And so the idea is that, you might see a Motorola earn phone or a Samsung earn phone out there in the future. And so, and the way it works essentially is, if you want to get paid, like think about things you do on your phone, whether it's playing games or listening to music, whatever it is, these same activities, reading the news, we're partnering with brands and advertisers that, they want access to your attention. And so that could be a Candy Crush, that could be a news site. And so they're willing to pay a certain amount. We pay you per minute that you do that activity. And as you're doing that activity, you get those points. Those points then accumulate, and you could take those points and then convert them into cash or into gift cards or into crypto or whatever you want it to do. And so ultimately, that's just the simplicity of the model. We monetize anything that you could possibly think of, whether it's like, opening up your email to, streaming music, or, trading stocks. I mean, anything that you can possibly think of, because in order to make this model work, you have to really kind of tap into every aspect of someone's like, daily lives on their device. Everything's opt in. So the more you do, the more you earn. The less you do, the less you earn. And so, generally that's how the business operates in the business model.
Dan, is it heavily ad driven? For example, I'm paid to I have your phone. I'm paid to answer my emails. That's fantastic. I'm on the
Yeah.
email a lot,
Mhm.
but am I seeing advertisements? Is that what's fueling it?
There are, I mean, the business is heavily ad driven, but it might be like more, it's not necessarily that we're paying you to answer your emails, but we might send you like a newsletter or something with like an opportunity or content, and then there's advertising within it. But when you're streaming music, for example, it might be, hey, like, good job, Tony, you just earned 10 points. By the way, you unlocked this offer for a $200 sign up bonus with FanDuel. Do you want to claim it? And so, FanDuel is going to pay for that ad. And then essentially, if you take advantage of that, you get that $200 bonus. So there's a lot of earning and saving opportunities that are happening because, everything is kind of like tying into this rewarded kind of culture of like, hey, here's your time for this time and attention. Here's what we're going to reward you. And it's not just always points that we're giving out. We also incentivize a lot of advertisers that we work with to create their own bonuses to incentivize you to sign up, just like you would for a credit card, And so that's kind of like how the business model operates.
Dan, how much can a person earn, and is it capped? Is there a limit to what we can earn using our phones? Using the Earn phone, it's actually an operating system. You call it Earn OS.
Yeah, and it's built on top of Android. It's kind of like a layer on top of it. But yeah, internally we call it the Earn OS. And so there's not a limit. I think we try and set expectations. I don't want people to think like, hey, you're gonna get this phone and you're gonna earn like 100K a year. You know what I mean? Is it possible to earn 100K? Technically, it is, because we do things like sweepstakes, and we have influencers sometimes that'll refer like 500,000 people, and then they might make like a significant sum. But we try and kind of put this number out at about $100 a month. We have a lot of people that are way more than that on average, but our goal is basically, if you kind of think about what Uber has done in the ride sharing space, like they basically democratized the car, created an income opportunity with a vehicle. Airbnb did the same for your house. And so we kind of look at that with the phone, right? Obviously, not everyone has a car, not everyone has a house, right, to monetize. And so you're going to earn less in those things, but everyone has a phone. And so that's kind of the thesis around it, is like, it's meant to be supplemental. And then we also create a lot of saving opportunities. And so an example of that is like, I set up for a lot of these. So now it's like I'm an expert in them, but like, Facebook has a data breach. And usually when things like this occur, there's these monster class action lawsuits. It might be like a $10 billion lawsuit. Facebook has to disclose that and put like some sort of press release, but it's not really like in their best interest to, hey, like, let's go tell the world about this. So a lot of people actually don't find out about this at all. And so what we do is we'll find out those opportunities and we'll send them to our user base, because, for some of the ones I've signed up for, there was one with like Blue Cross Blue Shield. There was another one with like a Jewel. Like I was getting like $2,000, and I'm just like, this took like literally 1 minute of my time. You know what I mean? And in many cases, you don't even need a receipt to approve some of these. And so we're not getting paid for that. Like that's just us providing content. It adds value to our users, because our goal really is to create the most rewarding ecosystem in the world. I mean, at the end of the day, the business that I'm in is in the business of helping people earn and save money, right? That's the core of my framework as a company. And, even if you're one of our investors, like we have a lot of people investing in this company that are not users of our product. They're not in the demographic. They believe in what we do. They see like how the phone impacts everyday life so significantly. And we created this thing called Investor Club. And so our goal with that is kind of creating earning and saving opportunities catered to wealthier investors, right? And that's just kind of a way of how we mesh with our community to really create value, because I think that even the way that people think about shareholders is it's a little bit broken. Like I like the way how Web3 thinks about token holders, where it's like, when you have access to something, you're part of a community. There's value that gets unlocked. And, while the NFT craze has died down, some of those early communities, Bored Ape, Dot Club, and, CryptoPunks, these events that were happening, people wanted to be a part of that. Right. And so I think like, as a shareholder, I'm always thinking about, if Apple came out with a program, I was like, hey, if you own $100,000 in Apple stock, you get our products 1 month before everyone else. If you own $1 million in Apple stock, you get to come to the Worldwide Developer Conference. And if you have more than $10 million in Apple stock, you get to come to One Infinite Loop, and you get to meet all the other $10 million individual people and have a dinner that Tim Cook will be there. Now, will it change the aspect of how people will own or decide to sell Apple stock? I think it would, because ultimately what dictates the stock price is not only the company performance, but is the supply and demand curve of people owning that stock. And I think if you look at the most famous companies that have really cultish communities, like Berkshire Hathaway, that has an entire conference that he sells out in Omaha, that you have to plan for like a year and ahead to go. It's a reason, and so that they believe in that, and obviously the financial performance has to be there. But I think about that and how we can add value to our stock, or our shareholders, and that's kind of where I want to take it in the future, so that we are kind of constantly adding value in that sense.
Dan, even $100 a month, which you say is like a very low ball, thresholds thing, very, very small, very minor. Even $100 a month is huge in various parts of the world. People survive and thrive on that. A couple $100 a month is like incredible. Mm-hmm. Is your app, the Mode Mobile, is this specific to the US? Is it worldwide? Where are you on this scheme of things?
Yeah, product is fully worldwide. We kind of see our international user base more in like a beta, because, they can earn there. Obviously, it's very dictated to the amount of advertisers we have in specific countries. But it's also relative to as you're saying, the buying power, right? So like $1 in, Brazil goes much longer than $1 here in the United States. But where we see a big opportunity is also, other types of earning opportunities in those countries, like, within crypto and things of that nature. So we're always trying to really think, what are the opportunities and what are the issues with the other countries? Maybe there's like lack of trust in the financial infrastructure. So people want to do more things on chain. And so we're always kind of thinking about those different ways. But, we're in 170 countries, over 45 million people install this product. And, it actually makes up over 80% of our user base is the international side of our business, even though the United States actually makes up more than 85% of our revenue. And so, but you see the opportunity, right? Because now it's like a lot of businesses sometimes struggle with the next phase of like, hey, where do we go? For us, it's just more of a matter of like, hey, when we want to focus in key markets, which are the key markets that we first want to go into? But clearly there's a big demand here. And I think actually, if you think about it, for us, one of the most difficult things of even growing in America has been, while the advertising environment is quite advanced, market penetration for Android phones is only about 1 and 2, right? So it's like 50% is iOS, 50% is Android. Now go to India, Brazil, any emerging market, it's like 99%. Like Android, so it's like you're basically have 100% market share. And so I think that that's like a really interesting piece for like the scalability of the business. And that's why I really believe it to be like, it's much bigger than anyone possibly thinks is possible in this business. And that's why we're so focused on it, because I think that if you can unlock this model, you'll change, the face of the telecom industry, essentially, and it's like, and honestly, the low income, these lower end devices, I'm talking about the $150 sub, makes up the bulk of devices around the world, but it's a pretty horrible business from a hardware perspective. And we're a software company. Some people think that we're a hardware company, but, we have an earned phone, but, we don't make money on that phone. It's like we sell it for basically our cost. And, we had to do that because no one believed that the model was possible. So, I flew to Asia at the time and was like, how can I just launch 5,000 phones? And we figured it out and we did it again. And then we got it into stores. But our business is really in the licensing and getting the distribution like, Roku has and has been able to build a $10 billion business from. But I think the main opportunity here is like being able to be in all those markets and then having your software really extrapolate across all these geos. And that's how you can impact billions of people. And, and sorry for the point that I was just making is like, for these $100 phones, these phone makers are making maybe like 1% gross margin. So I'm talking about like you make $1, you make a device for $100 and you make $1 on it. And now with these tariffs, like I don't even know what they're going to make. But the point is like, when you can do that and then you do a rev share for them through the software and the usage of that, and it's obviously think about who's buying that $100 phone, and you have two devices that are basically the same thing. One pays you, one doesn't. Which one are you going to choose? You're going to choose the one that pays you. And so I think that that's why it's such a big opportunity, and that's what our community sees.
We're speaking with Dan Novias. We're talking about the mobile wealth revolution. You can find him at modemobile.com. That's MODE mobile.com. What an amazing story of what you've done. I'm just astounded. 45 million subscriber base is absolutely amazing. What a culture. And with that, I'm curious, how do you maintain that? It's so huge. There's so much. What inspires your daily, weekly, monthly decisions on how to grow that, how to maintain it, how to keep it going? Because that's a behemoth.
Yeah, I think I mean, I don't know. We're always trying to I think like, it's not an easy business to do. I think like, for us, I think the number one thing I'm always trying to do is like, how can we align incentives with the users, the advertisers, and our company? It's like, I think that that's the number one thing that probably always is going in my head because, and those are probably where we've had pitfalls along the years where it's like, hey, something's working really well for a little period of time. But then if something goes out on that equation of like the value alignment, it basically breaks the whole thing, right? And then you have a huge issue. And so I think like the things that we're always thinking about is like one, how to create more alignment. Two is like, what are we not thinking of? Like, it's something that was like a big learning for me that's gone actually significantly well this year has been, last year I started thinking about like, what does our business model really do? What we're really doing is we are taking people and we're exposing new products to them. And today, the way that I make money is like some advertiser will pay me, a fixed fee for, if I bring him a user into a game, but then it stops there. Right. And so one of the ways I started thinking about it was like, well, I'm never going to own Candy Crush or TikTok, right? Those companies are just too big. And we have a lot of advertisers like that are like that magnitude. But there's all these like little apps, these little fragmented apps that we use of like, hey, well, yeah, I like this one for like my photo editing, or I like this one for this other little game that these guys make. And then when I went to look at who those people are, it's oftentimes like some solo entrepreneur or small team in some country, and they figured out this little product market fit, kind of built a nice lifestyle business, making a few $1,000,000 or an asset's making a couple $100,000 a year. And so I was like, what if we could actually buy those apps, just the asset, and then basically expose our user base to that? And then now, instead of our revenue dying at that, action, we can basically capture the entire lifetime value of that entire experience throughout the entire funnel. And so we did this as an experiment earlier this year, bought a nice asset, and we've been able to double it. And it's a 7-figure a year type of, asset for us. And so I'm really excited about that because actually what's happening is like, if you're familiar with like what's happening within the P&E space or P space, like they do these things called roll-ups, right? And so they're buying all these fragmented like mom and pop shops. They turn it into like a behemoth, and some of the most successful companies in the world have done that. And so I started looking at that and I was like, that's a really powerful way to think about like the Earn OS, which is like, I'm going to focus on the long tail. Like, what are all the random products that people like, that are out there that, people are thinking about getting out of, or maybe it's a small team, pretty manageable. And how do we expose that? Because now, instead of just making the advertising dollar, we're basically building a network. We're building an ecosystem. And that's really, really powerful. And so I think like those are the type of things that are keeping me up at night. And then also that creates also, reliable earning. Because I think a big hope thing that we want to focus on is how do we increase your earning? How do we increase your capability of getting exposed to new stuff? And how do we keep adding value? And these are the type of things that you have to kind of think about, and what we're most excited about as a company over the years to come.
I just want to make sure I've got one point on that, and that is, we are entrepreneurs and business people in the audience. Are there opportunities for us to move some of our products? Does it have to be a software type product? Uh, are there any opportunities for us with Mode Mobile on that? I mean, I'm just thinking with this,
Yeah.
we may not all have a mobile app first. We may not all have that type of an asset to sell and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, I think, even your podcast is a good example, right? Like, what is your goal on your podcast? You want listeners, you want to get exposure, you want people in there. I mean, we do billions of yearly streams on, through radio stations and stuff. And we actually have in our roadmap to expand to podcasts, right? So, how could we, what would add value there? Like, is how do you get more downloads? How do you get more exposure to people listening to your episodes that, I don't know how you monetize this, but that's an example. And so, it depends on your business, but, whether it's, you want people to get exposure into something you're doing. You want to grow to your email newsletter. You want to grow your coaching business. I mean, every audience is different, and we kind of have different cohorts of who our users are. Like, we have kind of like our more investor style audience that's more coming from our crowdfund centric campaigns. And then we have our more kind of like consumer audience that's coming from our core business. And then we have more of a Web3 audience from more of our international stuff. And so it depends what your business or brand is. But we diversify our revenues from going back to 2022 when I got really hit from revenue concentration. I am obsessive about not having revenue concentration. And so I'm always trying to not make sure that nothing that we're doing is contributing more than 20% of my overall monthly revenue. Because if it goes away, it can't take my business down with it. You know what I mean? And that's
Very smart.
a
Absolutely.
big learning for me in 2022.
Not put all the eggs in one basket, as the old saying goes. It's still so true. You've got to diversify. That leads to strength and long-term resiliency. Totally get it. Now I'm thinking with this, and that's really great on being able to grow, and you're willing to look at the smaller or the under the $1 million type of advertisement or opportunities. You're willing to look at everything, which is very, very smart. You're not gonna say no to revenue that might be there on the table. So I get that. And as I'm thinking with this, I'm thinking you're growing internationally. Lots is happening. You mentioned a little bit about it earlier. You said perhaps there may be some tariff issues. There may be all sorts of things. We don't know the economic challenges that we're going to run into. Do you have to tailor? I'm just thinking, do you have to tailor your strategy to different regions, different economic environments? You know, let's talk about some of the challenges and how you can deal with them to keep expanding and keep your foot in the market on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you always have to be you have to always think about kind of what's likely to come. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I mean, I'm just just have the same information that you have, and intuition. I think that you always need to assume 3 scenarios, worst case scenario, base case scenario, best case scenario, right? And as an entrepreneur, you're very optimistic, or I'm generally a pretty optimistic person. But I always try and put myself in that kind of scenario of what's the worst case that's going to happen, especially when it's something that's life or death. So an example for that for me was during that time in 2022 where I was like, wow, this market just flipped. And I could just see the writing on the wall. It's it's going to be so hard to raise capital. And I was like, how much runway do I have, to even get to the next phase? And what do I need to do? How much revenue do I need to generate to get to the next phase? And at the end of the day, it was still somewhat of a moonshot. It's hey, we're going into a crowdfund that we've never done, right? Are we going to be successful on it? And I was pretty sure we were going to be successful on it. But I wasn't 100% sure, but it was a calculated risk. And it was also the best path for the company, at the time. And had we been a part of maybe taking those VC dollars early on, we wouldn't have had the ability to actually do that because the board might have been no, we're not going to do it. Right. And fortunately, we set up our board in a way that they gave us the support to do that. But I think that, whether it's going into international countries, whether it's, thinking about what is to come, you need to talk, you need to kind of talk to others. I always tried to talk to as many other founders as I possibly could. And that's good for business decisions, because especially ones that are smarter than you or have been through shit that you haven't necessarily been through. I tried to listen to a tremendous amount of podcasts at the time that, tell me what is likely to come. And even it's like fear mongering, it basically gets you running on ideas. And I think that that was like how you make great business decisions during those hard times. I think from a user standpoint, though, you should listen and see what's happening well with other users. Like I always look at what other apps are doing well internationally to have growth in those countries. And, if there's anything like tariff issues or anything of that nature, like, fortunately for us, tariffs don't impact. I mean, we're a software company, but it is going to have an impact in the broader markets if it continues on, and there's going to be economic pain. Okay, so when economic pain occurs, what happens? People generally start cutting their marketing spend. Is that going to impact my business? But at the same time, people need more money during economic pain. So are they going to use our product more? So will it balance each other out? You know what I mean? And what I saw in the first kind of like cycle of this is that actually rewarded businesses did pretty well during the first version of economic pain that we had to deal with. And so, these are the type of things that I'm thinking about. So I mean, I'm somewhat rambling, but you kind of get like where my brain goes with all of these various
Absolutely.
different things where it's like, scenario planning. And, one thing I do every week is like, I go and float in a isolation tank, and just darkness, and salt water and just black. And all I think about are, a various, whatever the problem of the week is, but you can kind of visualize that stuff. And I think that's really helpful. So you need to take that time, and whether it's in an isolation tank or on a walk or in your morning, whatever, that time is really important. It's really important about the reflection of what is to come as opposed to being in the now and the present, because people are so focused on like they're on autopilot for their day that they can't even strategize into the future. And that's like when you'll get KO'd, without even realizing it,
You can tend to feel more in control by looking at the future, focusing on it, even though you're not sure which way things are going to go. It's still, you feel a little bit better than just being mired down and myopic, and it also helps that point of view, helps that resilient point of view come, where you feel that you can move better with things. And yeah, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month, but um, and for mode as well, I'm just thinking of, well, let's just say you're able to deal with whatever comes. We don't know, but you're able to just deal and keep going. Are there more products you're looking at coming? What's the future hold? What innovations do you think might come out?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, a big focus. I mean, the company today is somewhat structured in kind of like three, I would call, divisions. You don't really see that from the outside, but there's like, what I would say mode bubble is our core product, core business. We kind of have our mode media, which is kind of like, it's kind of like our newsletter business and, a lot of content. Like that's a big business line for us that was actually born out of this. And this is like a perfect example of actually what we just talked about, which is like during hard times, amazing things sometimes come out of them. So before I go into the last division here, which I'll tell you in a second, is like in 2022 or 2023, especially 2023, I was trying to figure out other new revenue streams that we can come in because, we were really focused on efficiency and bringing the profits up, and revenue growth without spending. And 2024 was another year of that as well. And one of the things I had this realizations where I was like, we've had 45 million people come through this platform, and we have 45 million emails of people that have signed up, because in order to get into the platform, you need to sign up with your Gmail account, right? And that's not just a throwaway. It's your Gmail account. It's like your real account, like, you're going to use. And I was like, and one of the things getting prepped for the newsletter or sorry, for crowdfunding is that newsletter marketing was one of the biggest things where we advertise. I mean, that's like 80% of our advertising spend goes to newsletters. And I was seeing how much money I was spending with these newsletter companies. So I have this concept. I was like, what do we know about these people? These people like to earn and save. Like, we should just create a newsletter focused on earning and saving, just content, no, doesn't even have to have earning. And that business line, which generated zero, the year prior, last year generated about $2 million in just net income, right, into our company, right? And this year will be a mid-7-figure outcome, from it. And it was born out of nothing, was born out of like, it's the best way I can describe it is think about like a hot dog. You know what I mean? It's like the core meat of my product is like all the nice stuff. That's the counts. Like, what do you do with the excess? It's like, well, we're going to create this hot dog and we're going to sell that. And it's been super interesting to learn about that business. And I think the newsletter business is a great business. And so now we're, expanding that and it's growing and it's, we're improving content, things of that nature. But see, that was like an example of like, I would never have even thought about that to do that in a previous like life. And there's more mutations of your company life, I'd say, without that hardship being there. So anyways, like, so that's one of our divisions. Another one's like our Mode Money division, which I really think about more in this investing category or anything finance related, because in order to do crowdfunding great, you have to treat it like a product. You have to treat it like part of your DNA as a company. That's why we embedded it into everything that we do. We treat it like a product team. And so anything related to that audience, that cohort, we think about that and how that impacts our revenue and the products that we build. So I think the future of our business is really kind of growing these divisions, further. And, we have a very decentralized structure that I'm establishing right now, which is like bringing in leaders to run those P&Ls. That's how you scale, over time. And the latest finding is, finding these other undervalued assets that are out there that we could utilize our audience to expose people into and expand the amount of time and services that we can provide as a broader company for our user base and get those users and those other user bases into our product as well. And that lets you build a network. And so that's what we're really focused on. And I think that that'll get us to this ultimate mission of really making, the vast majority of phones out there earn phone capable.
This is so exciting. Once again, this is Dan Novias. We talked about the mobile wealth revolution. You can find him at modemobile.com. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show, talking about this, telling us about it. There's opportunities from the solo entrepreneur to 6, 7, 8, 9-figure companies. There's so much opportunity here. My mind is just like exploding with possibilities here. We can definitely do a lot. I just want to thank you. It was so good. Really appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Tony. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. And here's a special thank you to you for listening to the very end. And if you like this, share this with your friends. Tell them about Dan Novias. Tell them about Mode Mobile and how by using what you normally do, checking emails, charging your phone, surfing the internet. We know what those things are. How would you like to get paid for that? Absolutely amazing. Tell your friends about it, share it with it. And wherever you're hearing this, please follow the show. It helps to bring in more amazing guests to help you. It's all about helping you. All right, I want to thank you so much sincerely. Let's use this and let's help you move on your journey to success. Thanks, and remember, guys, just take action. Success awaits those who persevere and remain steadfast despite the odds. Sow good seeds. Do good deeds, and I'll see you on the next episode.